All right, all right. What's happening, people? Drinking a little drink, smoking a little smoke, and ready to dive into this thing. Sorry for the delay. I had some webcam issues. I thought I was going to have to cancel the whole thing. So I guess this isn't so bad. And I also found out I don't think the YouTube thing will work because of copyright strikes. I actually get copyright strikes because of the songs that end the show. I'm going to give it a shot real quick. Nope, it's not going to happen. So it is because of copyright strikes, which, the songs that I play are parodies, which are supposed to be under a class of their own, but the robots aren't smart enough to tell. They think it's either a regular cover or maybe they think it's the song. I'm not sure in all cases, but those things get me dinged, oddly enough. And I think that's why I can't go live on YouTube. But welcome, people. It looks like this is kind of a sparse one. There's a couple of people here, but not a ton. And I believe I did post the show everywhere. Also, I was late, so maybe that's a factor. It's a real shame that people aren't going to see it at the top of their news feeds, either on Facebook or YouTube, but we're just going to have to go with what we got. We're just going to have to go with this standard thing. I mean, if anybody were to see this posted on the Plus site, on Patreon, on Facebook, on Twitter, they'd be able to find it. All right. Wow. What a week. What a week. Trying to get ahead on the show. I feel like I got you 2 episodes pretty close to back. For people who didn't like KJ Osborne, there was Lance Mungia and Russell Targ. I like to think they're fairly diverse audiences because I know KJ was polarizing, very polarizing. A lot of people liked it, but the ones that didn't really didn't. So I understand. You're not going to get everybody every time, but let's see what's happening here. As always, people tend to like to know what I'm drinking. I'm drinking that Kahlua and coffee because it's one of those days. All right. Well, let's see what we got. Let me pull it up here. Of course, if you want to say something, you have to raise your hand. This is like grade school. There's a little button at the bottom of the screen that gives you that option. And let's see who we got. We got Martian archaeologist. I talked to him last joint session. Let's throw him in here. See if maybe he's got a webcam. Any webcam, Martian? Martian, can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you.
Right on, right on.
How's it going, Greg? How do I turn the webcam on?
Let's see. I think it's on your end because I believe it's enabled over here.
Huh. Okay. Well, if I can figure out how to turn it on, I'll turn it on.
Cool.
Do you want to call on somebody else? Give me a second.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It really isn't a big deal. No one, I don't think, has had video yet. So maybe it is on my side. But as far as I can tell, you're enabled. But regardless, logistics aside, what's happening?
Well, just having a good time. And I want to actually commend you for having a guy like KJ on. I mean, he has a very polarizing viewpoint. I don't share it myself, but I do commend you for having, a wide range of viewpoints on.
Thanks.
I think it's very important to do that.
Well, I think there's something in the mix, like we talked about last time. There is a religious component to all this. There's obviously an esoteric, context to what's going on. They like these biblical stories. They like to kind of, as Ross Ben would say, manipulate prophetic timelines like you find in Revelation. So I know that's in the mix. I just don't necessarily think that it is. I don't see it through the lens that KJ does. I don't put it back into a conventional box. I can't trust any of that stuff, knowing how much is manipulated today. Think about the whole timeline. You think some 2,000-year-old material's untainted? I just can't plant my flag there, But hey, to each their own.
Yeah, and really this is scary stuff that we're dealing with. So I don't blame anybody for, picking something that resonates with them as a kind of armor against this stuff.
Mhm.
Because really, these are really tough times. There's some scary stuff going on.
Indeed, man. Indeed. And I think, a lot of people did really like hearing your perspective on the last joint session we did. I saw a lot of comments related to it. I thought it went pretty well. Uh, how have you felt about it? Has anybody contacted you? Have you kind of thought more about the things we talked about?
Well, I went on a couple other shows with some of my buddies. There's a podcast called Six of Cups that you can check out. Also, yeah, Cruising with Steak. I was on Cruising with Steak a couple of times, and
Solid.
it's a good time. We just have fun and talk, rather like we're doing right now.
Sure, sure.
As far as the things that I was talking about before, there's a couple of things that I would like to point people to in my Twitter feed if they ever end up there. Particularly the four square stuff as it's laid out in the photos. It's basically four photos laid out with each other, and they show the commonality between the forms. I think that's the really important part. And one of the main ones that I like the most is the one that has the painting on it, and it's just really interesting stuff. And something that was actually brought up on one of the other podcasts was maybe these photos aren't from Mars. Maybe they're from somewhere on Earth. And people kept bringing that up. And it's a fascinating thought to me. What if these are photos of a culture on Earth? Because they have certain similarities to Earth cultures. That's why it was so easy to pick out, right? You got things that have roughly human forms and animal forms that you would find on Earth with our common artistic motifs that you'd also find here. So
Mhm.
maybe it is here.
Well, I look at these images, the classic grainy images of things on Mars and the moon, and I can definitely see some structures, some rubble. But then there's also things like I'm looking at your page right now, and you scroll down a little bit, and you've got like what is that? The painting at the Sistine Chapel where he's reaching out and touching God. You've got like
Yeah.
that superimposed on this little grainy figure, and that's where I'm like, I don't see that necessarily. I think I could see it being artificial, a little
Yeah.
familiar with
Well,
these things.
for my money, that's, I mean, maybe it's something that was kind of like the result of just kind of weird erosion, right? Or maybe some sort of electrical discharge. But I think it's interesting that it is so closely paralleled to the form that you find there. And that stuff, that's really kind of like a little rock, right? The
Mhm.
stuff that's interesting is the repetition of forms, and people can go check that out. But the stuff that I'm really kind of interested in right now is, where does the cosmic war, a la Joseph Farrell, line up with the Saturn hypothesis
Hmm.
as far as the generation of the solar system, right?
Are you talking about the Velikovsky stuff?
Yeah, Velikovsky, but more the newer stuff, the kind of plasma electric universe kind of stuff.
Like Saturn being the original sun?
Yeah, or at least one of the original suns.
Yeah, that's a far out one. I like it, but it
I
is.
love it, man. I absolutely love it.
It's just so weird to think of anything that epic happening in the solar system. And I guess with the whole plasma model, it kind of allows for a little bit more chaos than our conventional model. We're told if the goddamn ocean raises 2 degrees, everything's dead. And so to think that we just had this sun switch between the current sun and Saturn, I mean, that's pretty mind blowing. It's pretty epic in scale for what we're used to within the universe or within the solar system. I mean, of course, we do have the asteroid belt. That was clearly some.
Yeah, and I really don't know, and that's the awesome part, right? No one really knows.
It's true.
Or maybe somebody does. Maybe the people with the money and the technology to go investigate this stuff for real actually know what's going on.
Well, clearly, there's got to be a whole body of information, of data that's been collected that just isn't reaching the mainstream. They wouldn't go down the path if it wasn't yielding some results. And it seems like there is a huge story to our solar system that involves more than Earth. And so I'm not surprised they're looking into it. I wish we could just get it for ourselves. I wish there was any way to crack that code. I mean, looking at some of these images, I guess contributes to that. And then John Brandenburg stuff contributes. Joseph Farrell's Cosmic War, I think it's in the mix. But it's hard to contextualize a full timeline. Did we all initially come from Mars? Did we come from Tiamat, the destroyed planet? I mean, what are your thoughts on exactly how we got here? Or maybe the bullet points to the timeline as you can construct it?
Man, I thought I had it, but then this Saturn stuff, I really kind of read into it. I'm like, man, it just threw everything into disarray for me when I started considering that. Because really, when I came at this stuff, it was maybe the solar system was arranged differently, but not that differently, maybe a little bit. But I really don't know at this point. It's kind of thrown it all into disarray for me, man.
Yes, I would understand why. So do you think that these attempts to, or at least the talk about attempts to getting to Mars, do you think these are legit? There are people who think that the astronauts are just going to be the first guinea pigs for some real cybernetics, and they're going to be hypnotized to believe they went, and they're going to walk them into some studio somewhere and Truman show them. What do you think? Are we actually getting out there? Does it seem feasible to you? Is there a secret space program doing it all the time?
It depends on what you mean by we. Um,
Humanity.
so it's my opinion that certain elements of humanity could have gone to Mars quite a while ago and probably already have for their own reasons. And I think that the real stuff that's been trotted out to us now, like this NASA stuff and everything, it's basically a money grab and a social organizing thing, right? You got to get everybody online for something. The space race worked great last time. Let's try that one again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's what it seems like to me. And and as far as the real technology, man, that stuff's really dangerous. We got dangerous stuff here, but if you start messing around with the real hidden tech that's implicated in going to Mars, by lunch or whatever, that's some extreme stuff. So I don't think that's going to be released in a major way for quite a long time.
Well, if you fold in some of the hollow fractal stuff and just that whole motif we always hear that of just non-locality, the whole spooky action at a distance, there's an argument to be made that some esoteric perspectives on science can actually get you to instantaneous travel pretty quickly. It's maybe baked into the natural universe. We're not steered that way. We're into combustion and fire and all that kind of stuff. But apparently there might be some kind of technology there, the whole 0 point thing. I don't know. Do you think that these crafts have been unlocked? It seems like from Thomas Townsend Brown on up, there is a history there.
Well, there's, I think, two ways of looking at it, right? There's the one way, which is kind of a brute force technology way to come at this stuff.
Right.
And then there's the way that people have known about forever. And you find it in religious traditions and spiritual traditions and stuff like that, where the human mind and the human spirit essentially is capable of things that make science pale in comparison on pretty much every conceivable way. But it requires a lot of training, and it requires a viewpoint that is, I don't know, incompatible with the current Western culture. I mean, you just don't find it here because the people that have developed the technological aspect find it to be a very great challenge to their own power if people can do this by themselves. And it's in fact kind of a challenge if a lot of people could do this. It presents certain problems for the structure of society as we understand it, right? Because we're talking about mass telepathy, sharing of thoughts and experiences on extreme deep levels, and that's really kind of a big step for people to take into account.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you about, did you listen to the American Cosmic episode? Did you hear about the one I did with Dr. Diana Paulselka about her ventures into the inner circle tech elite?
No, I haven't got to yet, man. I've been so swamped with work, but it's first on my list.
No worries. I only asked because that book was, of all the ones I've read recently, probably the most exciting because it is almost a memoir of her just going through these experiences within the tech community. She has two people, they go by pseudonyms in the book because they won't reveal themselves, but they claim to be working with alien technology all the time. There's one part in particular where one of the guys drops a line describing being brought into the program. He's like, now I sit at a desk and behind a wall, there is something that is either giving off signals or it's absorbing signals. I can't tell which. We don't know much about it. I can definitely understand its language, which I'm assuming is some kind of telepathic thing. But there might be a lot more alien artifacts than just Roswell or Rendlesham Forest or a few crashes here and there. There might be some stuff that these guys are working on all the time. Who knows? I mean, but that episode to me, that book in particular, is the best thing we have for as to a window into what these programs might be looking at in the last decade or two, as opposed to all the conversations which are always about the 40s, 50s, 60s, you know? So it's pretty cool. I would check that one out.
For sure. I will check that out.
Mhm.
Definitely. I mean, that sounds really interesting. And it speaks to the fact that this technology stuff has been conserved in the Western cultures in very close circles, you know? I mean,
Mhm.
it's operating on a government level, but the people who have full access to all the files, it's basically kind of a family business in some way. And I don't know exactly who they are, but you know, a lot of names get bandied about, and people can look up online, you know, who's involved with this stuff. You know, we don't need to name names here, but
Indeed.
they do work on it as a form of their own kind of inner, almost spiritual tradition, and they look at it that way. I do think that's a helpful way to conceive it.
That's a big part of her book too, is that whole angle of the religiosity of ufology. You know, she is a professor of religious studies, so she looks at it as a culture, which I appreciate. I kind of like looking at things like that, little subcultures, but it's pretty wild, the implication. She also has a few quotes from Jacques Vallée that are interesting. One that stuck with me is just the talk that this is apparently something he wrote about a long time ago, but I completely forgot about it. But when you map the UFO sightings and the flaps of UFOs, the hot spots, there's like a pattern to it that would suggest some kind of intelligence behind it, as if to say he uses the term a pattern of reinforcement, as if
Hmm.
it's like some Pavlovian training. And that's a curious idea. Like, it isn't that we're seeing aliens in these crafts. We're seeing some kind of technology that is, I don't know, baked in to reinforce the weird or something. I liked back when I was talking with Crow, we used to do these shows about Hattie Bob, and I liked the idea of some surveillance system still in place. This came up with Linda Moulton Howe a while, like maybe a year ago too, that the orbs that people see might be part of an ancient surveillance system or some kind of quarantine, something put on the planet because of that cosmic war, something just automated that might still be in place. And I think I even did an interview with Joseph Farrell about that, where it was referred to as the Treaty of Versailles template
Yep.
for ufology. Exactly. Like, you can look at the Treaty of Versailles and see all the things that are in it and then scale that up to a cosmic level and be like, maybe the earth is under some kind of quarantine there. And that gets into the religions too. The whole fallen angels were being punished for a previous something, you know. It's all
Well, hey, man, if we were anything like we are now, way back then, I wouldn't argue with the kind of Versailles Treaty sort of thing to keep us here, you know? If we were as crappy and warlike back then as we are now, it
yeah,
makes sense.
indeed.
And one thing I just want to point out about the extraterrestrial hypothesis is that the ultimate end, really, of that, I think, is the narrative that's pushed about human beings being the creation of extraterrestrials. That's just way too dangerous a thing, because
Why is
that
that?
because it means that human beings are essentially the property of aliens.
Hmm.
And if human beings are the property of aliens, they're somebody's property. The aliens or whoever has the ability to designate a trustee to act on behalf and look after their estate. So that's going to be the new power group, right? It's just kind of a new feudalism sort of thing, kind of a divine right of kings.
I was reading Chris Knoll's blog just the other day, and he was writing about just such speculation that all the mermaid symbolism, he goes through a whole bunch of transhumanist type of things that he's seeing in the culture. And considering the idea that maybe all this programming is to prepare for the return of the old ones, return of the original property owners, as you might say.
Well, yeah, but I just don't think that in a lot of ways that's accurate, at least by the people who are rolling it out. I think that that narrative tends to be co-opted by the people who co-opt all of the other religious narratives, right? So whether or not it's true in fact, it's being rolled out and will likely be used as another sort of excuse to exercise the same power and the same structures that have been used with the other religions. I mean, it shows all the same signs of that. And plus,
Right.
if you have people agreeing en masse that they're the property of, and creation of something, you just have another religion.
Fair. Like, you don't like the implications of the slave species hypothesis.
Yeah, I think that it's dangerous in the sense that it allows for this exact same sort of feudalistic, totalitarian sort of state. And you replace divine right of kings with the people who are most closely related by genetics to the extraterrestrials.
I get what you're saying, but if you take aliens out of it and just say the elite, I mean, I already feel like I was raised in a culture where I was bred to be a slave and my education system was,
Exactly.
all backward. But I broke free. So, I mean, I guess I'm okay with if I was born to be a slave, so be it. I'm not one now. And I guess I don't really care. I get those implications don't really bother me, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's the whole point, though, is because nothing's going to change because it's just the same as it was before.
Right. Well, I mean, it seems like there's always been an empire of some kind.
Yeah, but I think we should distinguish in my last point, just distinguish between the actual phenomenon of UFOs and the extraterrestrial hypothesis as it's presented in the media. These are
Right.
two very different things. The phenomenon of the UFO is something I think ultimately different than the craft that are flying around.
Yeah.
And I think this is like a Jacques Vallée sort of view, right? Is
Yeah.
that the UFO is important to the person who sees the UFO,
Mhm.
and what it has the almost singular function of, if you see it and you try to understand it, it will fundamentally change who you are if you try to understand it. And
Mhm.
so in that way, it acts like a teleological device because it alters your destiny if you try to understand what it is, right? So it's almost like a strange trap or a contract that we don't really know where it leads. Kind of Terrence McKenna coming through there.
Sure. Yeah. I like it, man. Provocative for sure. Someone brings up remote viewing, which the last episode I did was with Russell Targ, the co-founder of the Stargate project at SRI. And according to him, you can remote view something 6,000 miles away as easy as you can something in the next room. You can remote view through time just as easily. That it has no bearing on the accuracy or the effort involved anywhere you are in time or space. And there's people in that program who've said they have remote viewed Mars, remote viewed the moon, and seen alien bases.
Mm-hmm.
Pat Price described 4 alien bases on Earth, and he gave their locations. I thought that was pretty wild. So who knows? But there's very likely a remote viewing application that could tell us more about the human story, but I just don't know if I would ever be able to trust it. It seems
Yeah,
like it's there, though.
yeah. Well, that's tough, because the remote viewing is definitely possible. Remote viewing as a phenomenon is known throughout human culture, since the beginning, right?
Mhm.
but as remote viewing, quote unquote remote viewing, what Russell Targ is talking about is a very specific technique that they're using to do this stuff.
Right.
And that is, it just has applications. They're making it into a tool, which it is a tool. It's a property of the human mind, so why not use it? It gets tough because, just like you've said, it's just as easy to view things in the next room as it is in the next time, or as it is on Mars. And because it's just as easy to do that, to do each of those things, it's very easy to get them all crossed up. And if you're not very experienced and you don't have very experienced operators, you're going to get them crossed up. And I think that accounts for a lot of the noise that comes through. You just don't know if it's coming from another time.
Yeah, it does seem to be difficult to distinguish the signal from the noise, but apparently a lot of people have beginner's luck that is just accurate. So,
hey, did you ever use his app?
Did I ever? Oh, actually, I don't have an iPhone, so it's mainly on the iPhone store. But I did find that someone had ported it over to Android. It just didn't seem like it was the official one, and I tried that one. I mean, it's a simple application, it seems, but I didn't do too good on the first try.
Yeah, that thing's fun. You can get some interesting and fun results out of that. I got the best results by not trying to remote view, but by jamming with it. I would have a beat or rhythm going on in my head and hit the keys in syncopation with the rhythm in my head. And when I would do that, I got really high results on that little thing.
Wow.
So that was the most interesting part for me. So it was just a fun game, right?
Right.
I'm trying to learn how to remote view.
So is all this just a hobby for you? I mean, you seem fairly committed. You got the Martian archaeologist Twitter. Are you transitioning? Are you gonna maybe become like a researcher of some kind? I mean, you can be an armchair researcher, but are you gonna go professional? Do you have book plans? What's the deal?
I really don't know, man. I really don't know. I've been into this stuff since I was really young, so it's kind of just the world I live in.
Mm-hmm.
It's like back in the day, my dad told me when I was like 7 years old, hey, just remember the snake is the good guy in the Garden of Eden. And
wow.
you can go to church. When we go to church, it's okay. Just know that the priest, he really means to talk about the real God. He just doesn't know. He can't understand it. It's okay. But the person who wrote it, they know. So he's just repeating what they know. It's okay.
So you're like,
all right. Yeah, I guess I don't know. He's a weird guy.
What can you do? We're all weird. All right, man. Well, hey, it was good talking to you.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure, Greg. Always a pleasure.
Take care of yourself and start working on that book, man.
As soon as I find a suitable topic.
All right.
All right. Thanks.
Good man. Fun. So I do see a few more people in here now than were in here when I started this thing. I am ready to see another hand raised. So there is a button towards the bottom middle of your screen. You can raise your hand if you want to tell me about a theory you have, a personal experience, maybe some paranormal thing that happened to you, or a local conspiracy, just some general old small town corruption. I could hear about that. All kinds of good stuff. Someone asked why remote viewing hasn't told us when and maybe even how the pyramids were built. It probably has. I think there's plenty of people who have tried to look at that. You might remember an episode I did with the guy from the Farsight Institute, which is a remote viewing group that is quite strange. They've looked at Atlantis. I believe we even talked about the Hollow Earth in that one, but they are using remote viewing to try to see some very strange stuff. When Lance Mungia was on Rune Soup, he talked to Gordon, or Gordon mentioned in that interview that there was a session where they tried to go back to the beginning of time, and the remote viewer just reported seeing some like lemur creatures running around, jumping around, playing with sticks or whatever. And I thought that was interesting. I mean, who knows what that is? But yeah, let's see. Hands up. Lots of hands up now. Bringer underscore. Let's see what you got.
Hey, what's up, Greg?
What's happening?
Hey, nice to speak with you. I've been following you for some time now.
Awesome.
I actually emailed you maybe around a week ago to tell you about a couple of weird UFO-related dreams that I had.
Right on. I do believe I remember that email. I get that email more often than you might think, but they're prophetic in some sense, right?
Well, I'm not sure, but I have only of late been having these kinds of dreams. I have to confess that I'm clean and sober for some time now, and since I started doing that, I noticed that I've had all kinds of crazy dreams, and I hear that's pretty common.
Yep.
But yeah, a lot of weird dreams, and the UFO dreams in particular kind of follow a theme. Crashing flying vehicles. The first one was human-made vehicles like fighter jets that were crashing, and the second one was like this gigantic. I don't know how to describe it except that it looked like a big rectangular type vessel, and it looked like it wasn't fully materialized in our dimension, but it came crashing down into a gas station close to where my parents live, and there was a lot of other stuff too. But yeah, but that wasn't actually what I wanted to share with you.
Okay.
Because I've already covered that ground with you personally, and for the benefit of the other people listening who might get a kick out of this, I think that I first dipped my toes into the waters of interest in the paranormal when I was a little kid. There's this motorcycle club that my dad has always been close friends with in the town where I grew up. I'm from San Bernardino.
Okay.
My dad had this one friend who was a member of this club. I don't think it's really relevant to mention the club actually, but he was a motorcycle guy, and he was hanging out at my dad's house where I grew up one day. And as he was leaving, he was hit by a car, and he perished like a block away from where my folks live. And one of the things that my dad kept of his, because my dad was actually really close by when it happened, my dad came to the site of the accident and kept the hat that this man was wearing at the time of the accident, and he brought it home with him. And when I was a little kid, while this hat was in the house, I would sometimes see out of the corner of my eye, I could never see it straight on, but I'd be like sitting down playing video games, Nintendo or something in the living room. And the Nintendo system was up against the wall where to my right, I could sort of out of my periphery see the stairs in the house. And I would see this little person that looked like, in my mind, like a little goblin or something, or maybe like a leprechaun.
Wow.
Crouched down, and he'd be standing up there at the top of the stairs, and I would get a sense of him, and when I would look, of course it wouldn't be there. Something that would happen periodically throughout my childhood for a number of years, like probably from the time I was old enough to play Nintendo, I guess. So maybe like 5, 6. Yeah. And eventually my dad returned the hat to the motorcycle club that this guy was a member of, right? And from that time on, I never saw that thing again. So I think that whatever it was attached to the hat.
Huh.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, crazy. I tried the hat on once, and my dad found out that I had been messing with it, and he got really sore with me about it, actually. He was like, "Don't mess with that hat," and he took it back and put it away in his closet where I couldn't get a hold of it. It was,
wow.
Had some strong sentimental value to it.
Yeah. That's an awesome story.
About, right?
Yeah, and Gordon White, actually, it's funny because I just saw he shared on Facebook, scrolling through my newsfeed, it stuck out to me. He put responsible vending. And it was a story about a guy who owns an antique shop, and he warns customers about the haunted objects, or when they buy a haunted object. I didn't get into it too much. Maybe he can tell which ones are and which ones aren't. But I just thought, yeah, that is responsible. I mean, I guess if things can be haunted and you're an antique dealer, that's residue that you're putting in people's lives.
Yeah, I think so. I think that people's essence gets attached to things that they possess in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe a wristwatch, or yeah, a hat, or maybe even a pair of shoes or something. Shit, a chapstick. But yeah, I think that that's absolutely possible, and I think that that was the case in this situation for sure.
Wow. Good
There
story.
was one more story, if you
Sure.
don't. Yeah. So okay, actually, it's one, but maybe connected to two, and only one of them directly relates to experiences that I have, but they might be the same thing.
Okay.
When we were kids during the summertime, my house was on a 4-house block, and then there was just fields on all 4 sides around it. Right. In the summertime, we would play hide and seek out in the fields, and like on a full moon night, it was totally illuminated, and you could see well enough to where you could run around theoretically all night long. And at the corner of the street, there was like sort of a group of trees. There was like eucalyptus and olive and maybe a few other kinds I can't remember. And there's a spot where like there was the paved part of my road, and then there was like this little spot off to the side where the field like dipped down, and there was a trail for like riding dirt bikes and stuff, and the trail would dip down and then go up. And we were playing hide and seek one night over there in the dip down part of the field at the corner, and a couple of us were kind of cruising up the part where it goes back up, which is towards this platform where there was like a burned down house or whatever. And I swear to shit, dude, I look up this road and there's this fucking big black thing. Black as in you couldn't make out if it had fur, you couldn't make out if it was wearing clothes, but it was bigger in my mind than a human being would normally be, right? Like I don't know how much bigger, but it was humanoid in form, as in, 2 legs, 2 arms, a head.
Sure.
Big black thing with like long fingers, and I swear I could see like red glowing eyes on this thing. And maybe that's something that I invented post facto, but I wasn't the only one that saw this thing. My younger brother also saw it, and a couple of our buddies also saw it. And it was like the kind of thing where as soon as we all realized that we were seeing something up there at the top of the hill, we all just took off and went home, and we were like, did we see like a werewolf or what was it? But we all.
The same sense that you saw it?
Did it make sense?
No, did it sense that you saw it? Like, did it looked right back at you?
I think it was standing there watching us, and I saw us before we saw it.
Ah.
Yeah. It didn't it didn't advance on us or anything like that. I never got the sensation that we were being chased, and none of us said anything like, dude, it was following us. We just saw it. And as soon as we all realized we saw it, it was like piss your pants and run away type thing.
Yes. Wow. Well, that's awesome that you can share that with other people at least. I mean, I saw something when I was young that I would say some of the things you said kind of resonate with it. It was bigger than a humanoid. My parents were nearby. You probably heard me say this in the show. My parents were nearby, but they weren't looking over in this area. And I was like, you got to see this. You got to see this. And they thought I was like pranking them because that was common amongst my family. And I said, there's a weird bear thing. And that's kind of what it looked like. A little bigger than a human, but like a bear standing on 2 legs. And then I said, no, it's a rhino, which clearly makes no sense. But I was dialing in on its skin because it wasn't fur. It had more like a rhinoceros or elephant's gray, dark skin. And maybe it was shifting a little bit in shape, but it definitely, as soon as I saw it, it looked at me like, oh shit, and then took a couple of steps and just kind of faded out. And it was just really upsetting that I was the only one who saw it. I was obviously bawling in tears. I made my parents go door to door to the houses right around there to ask them if they'd ever seen anything weird. I was just that upset. I was just so desperate for someone to say, I've seen that too. And clearly that's never going to happen. And it didn't seem like a Bigfoot. It didn't seem like typical stuff I hear about, but I guess shadow figure is the closest thing. It didn't have glowing eyes, but it seemed somewhat similar to what you're talking about.
Did anybody else that you knew in the area, or did you know anybody in the area? You said you were pretty young, right?
Yeah, I was pretty young. My parents had a house built in a neighborhood that was like kind of just being formulated. So, that the reason why that's important is just the context that this was heavily wooded areas in rural Missouri a few, 6 months, 9 months earlier. And then the subdivision sprung up. So I didn't know if it was like residue of the woods or some creature that used to live there that was now like trying to find a new home or something. But no one I knew saw anything strange. But I guess I'm just going to die with it.
Hey, maybe it was just for you. Maybe it was like your first experience with something that was not within the normal realm of existence that we all know. And one of the kind of things that a lot of people just outright dismiss as nonsensical or impossible.
Right. Or hey, who knows? If we develop time travel in the next 30 years, maybe I went back in the past and freaked myself out to prompt myself to start a paranormal conspiracy podcast.
Yeah, exactly. That was like your introduction.
Right. I'd be like, hey, I got to go back and freak myself out to get me believing in this stuff, to get me thinking about this stuff. I mean, who knows?
Maybe just having said that, you may have actually created that possibility in some other dimension or something, right?
Right. Retrocausality. It's the whole Interstellar plot line. I loved that when I saw that in Interstellar. It was pretty mind-blowing because it hadn't been expressed that way before. That paranormal experiences or something could actually be someone who, after they died, are trying to reach back and they're actually in a point in time where they were alive, but their spirit or their consciousness is there. I mean, hey, after Russell Targ talking about remote viewing, it seems like your consciousness can be projected to any time or space and you don't even have to be dead.
I love it.
Yeah, wild. Well, right on, man. Good stories. Nice talking to you. So let me ask you before I let you go, do you have a favorite THC, a favorite guest, or a favorite specific type of show?
I always love it when I get to hear Gordon White talk. He's got a very commanding type of presence.
Yeah.
I like Chris Knowles a lot for sure. I'm really into anything that's magic related. Definitely. Being put on the spot, I can't really think of the names of a lot of the people that I've heard that have discussed magic in particular, but yeah, into it. I've bought more than a few books from people who I've heard speak on your show, and I can't remember their names right off either. Real Magic by Dean Radin is one that comes to mind right off the top. Yeah, anything on Solomonic magic in particular always piques my interest.
Like Dr. Stephen Skinner.
Dr. Stephen Skinner is a great one. Absolutely. After I listened to him on your show, he's appeared several times, has he not, on yours?
On mine, it was just once. And I don't know how many interviews he typically gives, but there's a couple out there.
Okay. Do you have rules about talking about other podcasts?
Oh, no.
Okay. I've heard him speak on another one that I'm really into. This guy seems to focus primarily on Solomonic magic. Have you ever heard of Glitch Bottle?
No.
Glitch Bottle, the guy who runs it, his name escapes me, but if you look it up, it'll be pretty easy to find if you just Google Glitch Bottle. Alexander F. is his name. And he seems to focus a lot on
someone who's been recommended for me to have on before, but Glitch Bottle, I would remember that. But anyway.
Yeah, that's his show, and Dr. Stephen Skinner has at least 2 episodes on the show, and a lot of other great practicing ceremonial magicians and students of the game, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, into all things magic, man. But the show in general, I love, man. Seriously, I've been a paid up member of Higher Side Chats Plus for a while now, and I have no regrets, man. And I'm gonna continue to be a member.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you for everything, man. I appreciate this show.
Right on. I'll keep doing it. Just keep listening.
Hell yeah.
All right, dude. Peace.
Have a nice evening.
You too. Good stories he had. I like that. I would love to hear more paranormal stories. I like the commonalities amongst them. Sometimes they always hit the same notes, but people see some weird stuff. I think most people, when they dig deep, have a few strange things they can't explain from the past, usually when they're kids. Let's see. All right. Mr. Sullivan. Oh, I just got hit with a call in. Hello, hello.
Mr. Carlwood,
How you
Sir
doing?
Carlwood. Wow, man, what an honor. Thank you so much for calling on me.
Yeah, you got it, man.
Yeah, I actually tried to get up to see your show not too long ago at the Comedy Store, but I didn't know that they would actually have a live audience. So I was denied the opportunity to actually meet you at that point. But it's an honor now to get in front of you here and get a chance to drink a little drink, smoke a little smoke with you, my friend.
Cheers. Well, what's on
Yeah.
your mind?
Well, man, I've been a fan of the show for many, many years now, and I've been a proud card-carrying member for years as well. And I've been privy to these joint sessions now a few times, and it's great to be a part of one finally. And I mean, there's like a smorgasbord if you want to get to it about like what I could hit you up with, but basically just hearing what some of these other callers have talked to you about, personally, I guess the shows that always tend to, have it for me are the ones that kind of skew more to the paranormal. And personally, it's my mother actually has recently kind of come forward and said that she actually has visitors that come to her in the night. And she has everything from children to the only time she says she's felt scared has been this older gentleman that showed up. And myself personally, actually, I've had visits by the shadow people. I mean, kind of like that sleep paralysis realm where, what was the documentary that came out that kind of went into that?
I know there was a recent.
Yeah. But anyway, so I vividly have an experience personally where I was in that liminal state, and distinctly I was sleeping on my stomach and remember feeling like a pounding on my back. Tried to wake up but couldn't, and it was, I finally was able to like look over my shoulder and just saw this like silhouetted figure with like slit eyes looking down at me, and it was one of the weirder experiences ever. So
Did it move towards you at all when
it definitely, yes.
Okay, that's a commonality. So
100%.
here's a weird thing. So a couple years ago at my wedding, of course, people are just talking. People who I know from totally different walks of life, different eras of life, are just chatting it up, drinking, and it obviously this kind of stuff comes up even because just of what I do. People are like, "Hey, this guy's podcast is doing all right," and then they just start talking. And two of my friends, one from high school and one from another area of life, started describing the same sleep paralysis, shadow people in the room experiences. And it was like two people who were talking about a movie they just saw. They're like, and then this happened, right? And then, yeah. And then this happened. And that was the big thing they said is they couldn't really move. It's like kind of in the periphery. But then once they see it and like they can feel their own fear heighten, it rushes towards them in a sense. And it's like, it definitely can tell when you're most afraid, apparently. And some people call them shadow creatures. Some people call them hag attacks, paralysis encounters. I mean, what the fuck is that?
I have no idea, man. It's so out there. And like, honestly, if I could take it into a level of like, I work a lot with plant medicine. Okay. And I've actually, I've been working with ayahuasca for over 7 years.
Oh, geez.
Consistently. So,
Where do you get it?
Well, let's talk offline.
No guy knows a guy.
Well, it's all in a very, very much, it's in a good way. I'll just say it that way, and I don't recommend anyone to go off on their own personal experiences. I would really recommend using and working with a trusting, reputable group. But we'll talk. But that being said, an interesting thing that I've heard recently too, discussing like the spirituality and the actual driving force behind a lot of plant medicines or other psychedelic medicines, specifically ketamine, is the fact that like, if you think about the intelligence behind the actual medicine, being it psilocybin, being LSD, being other things, ayahuasca, there's a rich history of trip reports and experiences that fill each single experience. So LSD has, obviously the boom in the 60s with Richard Alpert and Timothy Leary, and it has a history of people's experiences that will help color your current experience with that specific modality. Whereas ketamine, which is a very young, quote unquote, psychedelic, doesn't have that rich history that all of these other psychedelics tend to have. So therefore, in my experience of working with it as well, it's almost like you show up into this empty loft space where there's just a few guests standing at the corners, kind of like observing. Whereas obviously under psilocybin and other ayahuasca experiences, it's a rich tapestry of colors and experiences and everything else. And so to me, it almost seems that like these shadow people are kind of in a way approaching us because it is this new, it seems to me it's like a new way of reaching out that they're just exploring. And it kind of has that black and white categorical approach as opposed to the beauty of the psychedelics. But it could, in my opinion, maybe be a new way that we are being communicated with from an intelligent species, race. I don't know what to call it.
Yeah. And it's weird. It's like, was that seeded here for such a reason? Some people think mushrooms can survive in space. Were we programmed to be able to tap into this? Or is it something that maybe is a product of evolution? Imagine if remote viewing works. Okay. So like, that's on my mind because of the recent episode. If that works and it's baked into us the same way our breathing is, well, maybe there's other ways to tap into these things, like the compounds that are also found in nature. Maybe it's just nature's intergalactic telephone, the mushroom or ayahuasca.
Yeah, much in the way, obviously Terence McKenna spoke to that, the intelligence of it being seated in a consciousness that has come here specifically to engage with our own consciousness at this time period.
Yeah, I love it. Man, so with ayahuasca, I mean, do you consider that to be the best, let's say technology wise, if we're going to equate all the psychedelics or the range that you've participated with and equate them to telephones, I mean, what is the 5G psychedelic? What is the most potent signal that gets you there to, if your goal is communication with non-human intelligences?
Our goal is definitely 5D and not 5G.
Yeah, of course.
But the 5D technology that I feel has been seeded here, well, the community that I work with, we actually participate in a belief system that follows indigenous cultures representing South America and North America. There's a book called Return of the Bird Tribes. And what this represents is the fact that indigenous cultures believe that the next true great leap in spiritual development for humanity would occur when the eagle and the condor fly together in the sacred sky. The eagle representing North America, the North American indigenous cultures, which represent the masculine, the brain, the head, that form of looking at life, and the condor representing South America, which is way more centered in the heart and represented in more of emotional evolution. So to have the condor from South America fly in the skies with the eagle of North America represents the symbiosis and the coming together of both cultures. And that is what they believed was this current time period. And so it's interesting that a lot of the South American plant medicines and indigenous Amazonian technologies are making their way into Western culture. And so it is literally a bridging of those two societies coming together now. And for me personally, I do believe that obviously ayahuasca has become quote unquote popular and is very much available to a wide swath of people, which is why I would also caution that those that do wish to approach it only using a reputable shaman or group that is able to hold the space in a way that will allow the greatest growth and potential and actual access of the medicine itself. there's plenty of charlatans down in South America right now, even, that are just cutting the quote medicine with whatever it is to give that big firework experience to the Westerner who comes down there to experience it.
Right.
That being said, I do believe that in my deepest experiences working with ayahuasca, there is a level that you get to where you're communicating outside of body, and it is alien. It is completely foreign. I know several people that I have reported with, and myself included, that discuss conversation with mantid races, which is absolutely bonkers, but is actually something that is a common trip report, so to speak.
It is. It is. And is it telepathic communication with these mantids?
All the time, always. I mean, they don't really have the same beautiful lips that you and I do, Greg.
Of course. And is there a shape to their personality or their messages that's distinctly different from other types of entities?
In my experience, they kind of are the watchers. They're the overseers. The Greys kind of act as these drones that can either be co-opted for good or evil. But it seems to me, in my experience, the mantids are almost, they're like this, I don't want to say builder race, but they're kind of a level up, so to speak, that will kind of help facilitate and navigate all of the other beings in place. And generally, it's always a message of love. It's always a message of shock, like, oh my God, how the hell did you show up here? And then like, well, now that you see me, let's try to work some shit out.
Yeah, that's not uncommon from my one real experience with interdimensional entities. It's pretty much right in line. There was
awesome
initial surprise, and then in this case there were two, a male and a female, and the female was way more cynical about teaching me anything. The male was like, oh my God, now that you're here, let's talk about this. Let's look over here. Wanted to give me the tour of the house. And the chick is kind of like, this female energy is just like, why bother? He's going to be gone in 5 minutes. And, there's no sense in getting worked up and excited. Kind of like this happens all the time and it's not going to last. And I'm not getting worked up about it. And I'm like, all right, well. True.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of like a general philosophy. And one thing that I think I've learned through my experiences of working consistently with ayahuasca is all is connected, all is love, all is healing, and there's, in every single ceremony that I've participated in, it's amazing to me how someone that I see is having one of the most challenging experiences of tears and writhing around and, purging, the next day in a sharing circle will say, that was one of the most beautiful nights of my life.
Yeah.
And it's a consistent experience. So I would recommend anyone that's inquisitive or curious, there's opportunities within the States, but be cautious and really do the due diligence. And I would love to share my information, but I think it's best keeping it private. And you and I can speak privately if you'd like as well, Greg.
Sure. I have a pretty good lead on a couple of circles within LA, and
probably mine.
Right on. Wouldn't that be fun?
That would be.
Well, let me ask you this, just yes or no without saying who. Has any previous guest of mine been in your ceremonies?
Yes.
Okay. I think probably is.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
We should talk then. I'm willing to do it. Part of me just doesn't really know that I need to at this point, but
right.
I wouldn't do it. I don't need a lot of things I do.
There's a common misconception that a lot of people say is oh, you need to come into this work for healing, but oftentimes the true work is actually just understanding yourself better or understanding the greater cosmos better. And so instead of referring to every experience as a quote unquote healing experience, it's more of a teaching experience. It's teaching you more of like an access into your own personal psyche and consciousness, and how it's affecting everything, you know, the greater cosmos, the greater connection to everything. So, yeah.
Well, you know, the
So,
big debate, I still get into it with people, is if this is, first off, people think it's manipulated by the CIA or it's seeded in the culture. And then, so that's like the human conspiracy level. But then there's a whole nother subset of people who think these are demons. Whoops. These are, you know, demonic entities that are steering us down a dark path. But then I don't know anyone who's done it who comes away with that kind of
yeah.
feeling. And I think that's important. Like, you know, you can, saying it is one thing. Yeah, it might seem so foreign to you that you want to consider it demonic, but until you've done it, I think people should, you know, shut their mouth kind of.
Amen. Ouch. You
Right.
know, I think it's one thing to it's a policing of other people's consciousness, which shouldn't happen. You know, it's the whole Bill Hicks, it's the whole everything of just like, you know, we should, as sovereign adults, have the ability to manipulate our consciousness in any way that we choose, you know, and more than just the alcohol or tobacco industry allows. You know, there should be, obviously we're blessed in the great state of California to have legal cannabis. But you know, oh my God, your cat is just loving up on you or is really hungry.
Always got food sitting out, so it ain't that.
Oh, well then you're a good papa.
Yep.
But yeah, so I really do believe that we as conscious sovereign adults should have the ability to explore within as much as we're allowed to explore without.
I agree. Well said.
Yeah, man.
Awesome.
Well, yeah, I know. I would love to keep chatting with you all night, but I know that there's probably other people out there with some interesting things to say that I want to hear as well. In the meantime, I just want to share, like, I don't know, there's a book that I've been reading right now, which is all about Bigfoot, which is really piquing my interest, by a guy named Dr. Matthew A. Johnson. And my brother-in-law actually grew up in the Pacific Northwest, and his mother, who is very religious, doesn't go down the path of woo at all. She actually met this guy at a holiday party, the author of the book, and she has become a full-on Bigfoot Forest Nation believer. And so I'm digging into the book right now. I could send it to you, or if you want to just find one on your own. Yeah, it's called Bigfoot, a 50-year journey come full circle, by Dr. Matthew A. Johnson. And I definitely would recommend it. It's highly worth the dive.
Interesting. I did write it down. I'll check it
Cool.
out. So when you say Forest Nation, is the premise that this is something physical or supernatural, or what camp is he in?
He's in the camp that this is like a complete, almost like earth protectors. They're a group of individuals that exist in the shadows, or they actually have the ability to make themselves physically present, or hide themselves, almost like a zipper. Like they can blink in and out of reality, but they're always there.
Like
And
elementals, kind of.
absolutely, like elementals. Yeah. So without giving too much away, I mean, because it goes deep, but it's worth exploring. And yeah, the belief in his experience after personal experiences many times. You know, there's mothers, fathers, elders, children. And what I'm gathering, which is kind of cool, is the fact that like he starts to set up these like camps where he's exploring. Shoot, I don't want to give this away if you ended up having him on the show, though. This is the conundrum I'm in, but it's almost like the Bigfoot Forest people end up using him as daycare, and they put all of their kids and the teenagers around him while they explore their business throughout the night. And they kind of just show up and just like, here, observe human. And there is a component of a telepathy that occurs with them as well.
Yeah. Wow. I like that sort of perspective. And there totally could be an entire lineage of people who are in communication with these things all the time, and they simply don't talk about it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
imagine if from a child, fairies were approaching you and they basically said to you, amongst all the other things they said, they're like, hey, just don't talk about it. It's not going to, other people aren't going to get it. And we're going to have to stop talking. But if you keep putting out bread, we'll keep coming in from the hollow earth and telling you about St. Martin's Land and all the.
Avoid the fairy food though, Greg, right?
Yes. I mean, I think that it's likely, or it's possible, very possible, that there could be just entire lineages of people who live near the woods who carry on those traditions, and they're just never going to talk about it, and you're not going to know.
Yeah, 100%. I
Well,
believe that. And so, I think this book might be something to check out. And, if I can do anything to help you get in touch with him, I'd love to offer that olive branch as well.
right on. Okay, cool.
Yeah, man.
Badass. We'll talk. I wouldn't mind doing a Bigfoot show. The paranormal branch of the tree is one I get to probably the least, because sometimes you want to do cryptid shows and it's fun to hear reports, but it is kind of the same questions.
Agreed.
And, it's nice to revisit once in a while, or if there's hot spot of Owlman sightings in Chicago.
Which I love those shows. Those always inspire me too, man. Those are so trippy.
Me too. I love them. There's just got to be news, there's got to be news. And when there is, I love to talk about it. I have one coming up actually that is going to be in that realm. That's actually about, it's Ryan Burns, the Utah UFO Ranch. So he talks about a little.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with this guy, but
I've heard of that book. Yes.
Right on. He also talks about Skinwalker Ranch and some crazy stuff. So I think that's going to be fun. That's the only thing I have on the agenda that touches the paranormal side of things. But
cool. I think this might be an opportunity down the road if you get the chance. So
Dr. Johnson,
let me know how I can help you out.
All right, man. Will do.
And you just touched on it, but are you any way, shape, or form going to be making your way out to Contact in the Desert this year?
Not this year. I went 2 years in a row and then skipped 1 or 2 years, and I'm probably going to skip again. Have you been since it moved over to the hotel?
No, I have not. And this will be my first year. Is it kind of weird out there?
I haven't been to one at the hotel. Yeah. So this is your first time, period?
No. First time at the hotel.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool. So I don't know if you went to the 1 year where the air conditioning went out, but that was
that was a joy.
Yeah, it's hot out there, man. And I would go with my dad because his birthday is in May and he likes this stuff. So, and that is more the Ancient Aliens, coast to coast kind of guest that he likes. And it was fun, but I guess I just feel like I saw it because a lot of times it is the same people giving similar presentations.
Well, actually, I was going to hang up, but this is kind of like another question I had for you. It seems like a lot of the whole Cosmic Disclosure crew are moving away from actual alien tech and, hidden suppressed technologies and really getting bombarded and diving deep down the Q rabbit hole. I know that's a third rail to touch right now, but, I don't know. What do you think? It just seems like, is that where the money margin is and the profits are? And so the PROPHETs?
Well, there's going to be an element of that. Certain things are trendy. I actually passed on a chance to interview someone who's kind of big in that realm. And it's just like, I think that there are equations every election cycle for a president to say, everybody before me's been corrupt, I'm cleaning this shit up. We hear that all the time. That was an Obama thing.
Yep.
He's the outsider. So I just think this is a different net for a different crowd. And I have no faith in the Q thing. But when there are little elements that speak to it, I'm very willing to talk about them. I'm very willing to even prompt guests to bring them up, like with Dylan Monroe. He highlights a particular executive order, I believe it was 1221, that apparently is to take all the assets of anyone who's being charged with child trafficking. Well, if that legitimately happened, I'm willing to talk about it. I don't need to pretend that it didn't to keep my worldview intact, that this is all part of the plan, because I just don't think elections are genuine. And I don't like, that's the part where I can't, that's where it doesn't compute to me that they snuck him in. I just think elections have been gamed from the beginning. I mean, this is someone who went to the Clintons' wedding and stuff. I mean, they went to the same parties.
Yeah.
Think about the people you go to the same parties with. I don't know. I don't buy it. And I think the Q thing, maybe there are some things that line up, but it's probably someone on the team doing complete state-sponsored support propaganda. I mean, they're in bed with WikiLeaks, so and Cambridge Analytica. They know people who know the internet. So I don't think it's outside of the realm of reason that this is just not so much a LARP, because that makes it seem like just some kid in mom's basement. I'm talking about something state-sponsored that maybe does really coordinate with his tweets. Who knows? But I don't trust it, and I will be the first one to do a 180 on that when someone actually is charged with child trafficking, when a network is broken up, or when something actually happens.
Right. Yeah. Well said. Yeah, I agree with you.
Force, that's interesting. Put it in the context, Space Force and Space Command, two different groups. I would love to see those things roll out.
Amen, brother. Cheers to that. Well, I've taken up too much of your time already, but it's been a really great conversation, man. Thank you so much.
Good talking to you.
Yeah, and just to play the game, first time, long time. But my favorite episode, which I still to this day am so grateful for, is the Dr. Mary's Monkey. That is one of my favorites, man. I gave that to so many people, and like my mother actually, and this is actually kind of a weird story. My mother was actually in school the day that that John F. Kennedy was assassinated, and they actually that day happened to be going through a list of historical presidential assassinations. And during the course of her class that day, the loudspeaker came on, the principal ran in the room and said, "The president's been just shot." And before she left the room, the teacher went up to the chalkboard and wrote John F. Kennedy and the date. So weird coincidence. So when I showed her that episode, she was all in. She's like, "That makes sense, man."
Yes, and the implications that it really is about the simian monkey virus vaccines. Like it's more, it is in the conversation of JFK, but the implications for the vaccine side of it, I think, are mind blowing. And when someone reads that book, and when I read it, I was like thinking of those implications, and I was like, okay, is this conspiracy shit or is this a real story? Because you can go back and you can find many other books about the polio vaccine being tainted with this virus. It's that aspect isn't really controversial.
Yeah. That's why there's so many layers to it. That's why I love that episode so much. And I've actually read that book myself, and I was happy to hear it come up recently too in an episode, which is so cool. So
yeah, Chris Milligan. I wanted to make sure we talked about that because I do love the story, but it isn't something that it's not like I'm going to have Ed Haslam back on and be like, give me an update and this kind of bullshit for 2 hours. That's not how I try to get it all the first time. If it's that kind of guest, I wish, if he wrote another book, I'd gladly have him back. But having Chris Milligan on, it was just great because as the publisher, it's like, okay, let's talk about some of the stuff you've published so we can kind of almost do a greatest hits of both Trine Day and THC. But his dad's story is fascinating too. Yeah. So
whole thing. Well, hopefully that'll happen someday.
Yeah, indeed.
Awesome, man. Well, please do. I think I actually emailed you earlier this week. So if you can get that thread, Stephen Leonard Sullivan, hit me up. We'll talk further offline. But thank you so much for this opportunity, man. And much love to all the THC higher side chatters out there.
For sure, man. Cheers.
All right, man. Be well.
Sure. You too. All right. Good one. Might be getting myself into an ayahuasca circle here before too long. I think as it seemed to be the case, I've had this contact for a while and have not utilized it. All right, so I think I'm going to do one more. We might not get to a full 2 hours. We are definitely at an hour and 20 minutes, which is pretty lengthy, but I have an interview to record in the morning, and I like to make sure I'm completely prepared for that. That is the bread and butter. That is what we really are looking for, and it's going to be a good one. I'm pretty well prepared, but I've been accused of over-preparing, and I would say I'm guilty. Which is so funny because sometimes I don't even really say much. I give someone an intro, they talk for 40 minutes, and I just go down my 4-page script, cross that off, cross that off, cross that off. Well, I guess I don't have to ask that. And sometimes they just know all the beats of their own story, as they should. But it makes a 5-hour preparation process seem a little excessive when that happens. All right. Psychedelic Japan. I think you're going to be the last caller of the night. Seems to be a theme. Psychedelic Japan.
Hello.
Hello, what's happening?
I'm strolling through the streets of Japan. It's a work day for me. It's the morning.
Ooh.
I'm strolling to work here.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love it.
I just wanted, I don't have any real conspiracy things to blow your mind with tonight. I've been in Japan for 9 years without visiting the States. I guess I'm not officially American anymore, but just watching, all the trends unfold out here is pretty trippy.
Right. So what are you seeing out there as someone who's clued into the alternative perspectives? Do you see it emerging anyway in the Japanese culture? What do you think you could see that it might be interesting to listeners of this show?
Well, the Japanese media basically presents Trump mostly as a joke. At the same time, Prime Minister Abe gets along well with him, so it's kind of like he's a fun joke. But I teach students, right? And if any of them, if you ask, do you like Trump? They're gonna be like, no, he's insane.
I mean, it seems par for the course.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, that seems par for the course. That'd be what I'd expect.
But actually, I wanted to kind of get into some of the non-conspiracy things in some of your recent shows, and thank you for that.
Sure.
I just wanted to say a few things. I have a lot of time. I do my meditational stuff, and a few things recently have really stepped up my game, I think. I can't remember the author, the Luminous Light guy.
Right. Dr. Lieberman.
That's right. He was mentioning color therapy, and I was just as skeptical as you when he was talking about that. But I put that into sort of another meditation of mine where I'm focusing on chakras or whatever, but I started putting the color therapy into that and found that was kind of groovy. I sort of make a planetarium in my mind and blast that color that I want to see.
Have you tried doing it in front of an actual like infrared, near infrared light brick or whatever they call those things?
I haven't. I've been doing it on my mind. One of the things I've been trying to do with my activities is basically keep it to things I can do completely on my own. Meaning if someone threw me into a solitary confinement block, I could still do that stuff.
Right, like remote viewing perhaps.
Sort of, yeah. The other one I really wanted to bring out, because actually you didn't talk about it on your show, was another guest recently was talking about Wim Hof.
Oh, yes.
And you didn't even get into the method on the show, but I was like, man, what's he talking about? And I got into that, and that is actually changing my life quite notably.
Right on, yes. So Wim Hof, breathing method. It was actually Holofractal Joe, and there are some things about Wim Hof's breathing method on the Holofractal subreddit, so I asked him about it because it's something I've wanted to have, folded into the show, but he didn't. It wasn't fresh in his mind, so it didn't really go anywhere. But can you describe the breathing method, or for someone who just wanted the gist, is it long, deep breaths? Is it rapid, intense breathing? I
read the book. I read his book. It didn't quite, like, after hearing the podcast, I read the book because of that. I was curious. That didn't quite get me there. I needed to watch the videos from his site, which are free. You can pay him lots of money to do what or whatever, but the free videos seem to get it across just fine. But basically, it's sort of a intense in-breath, as in it's a cold day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're got to get that in, right? You slowly let it out, so you're building more carbon dioxide in your system, and it's controlled hyperventilation. You're getting high off of your own supply, so to speak. And I go for 33 breaths for obvious reasons. And after the 33rd breath, let it all out, and you will find you can not need to breathe for about a little over 2 minutes, which is kind of groovy, and you're sort of feeling a blood rush throughout your entire body. The other one is the cold, and I've convinced a few people to start taking cold showers now. It's getting yourself slowly acclimated to the cold, putting your hands and your feet in while doing deep breathing, and I've gotten to the point where I'm not going to climb Kilimanjaro in my shorts yet, but I can sit in a cold Japanese onsen bath for about 20 minutes now.
Wow.
But I'm just going through the day, very energetic now. And again, it's not something that you specifically mentioned on the show, but it got my curiosity, and I went researching, and it's definitely a thing.
I've thought about trying to get an interview with Wim Hof. I haven't tried, but it seems like he might be in high demand. But
yeah, I think he is. But just looking into it is, there might be someone else sort of on that track that also might be worth interviewing anyway. So.
Right on. Well, very cool, man. I love the fact that I can hear the wind going. I can tell you're walking on the street and you're in Japan, somewhere I've always wanted to go. Very awesome. You've been there 9 years, loving it. Happy with the decision?
Yeah, it's I guess I awoke or whatever in 2016. Although before that, I always thought, not thinking of any conspiracies or any deeper stuff, but think of Adam Smith's invisible hand. That's what I used to think of back in the 2000s when I moved back here. The invisible hand is pushing me over here. But as I get deeper and deeper down my own rabbit holes, I'm realizing, I actually managed to listen to my intuition correctly. Maybe smelling some of the things back in, around 2004, 2005 that are taking bloom now, and I'm very happy to be in Japan watching it.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, you're on your way to work, huh?
Yeah, but I just want to also point out I make, I'm a creative guy, and my creative partner who writes lyrics and takes photos and things for me, he turned me on to your show in the first place. And it took a month or two for me to take hold, but then I had to start listening to all your Plus episodes, so I'm digging it very well.
Thank you. I try. I mean, it's just about letting these guests do their thing. I think that my best talent is just the curator of the people that come to talk, but I mean, it's them who really are the star.
I'm only halfway through Wrestle Targ now, but just the idea of the Dungeons and Dragons Dungeon Master, that's your job. Maybe your guests have the info, but you know how to lead them there. And I've heard guests that you talk to on other shows, and you got better information out of them. So that's a skill, man. So
thanks.
Kudos to you.
Appreciate it. I try.
Anyway, I'm going to get on a train soon. I don't want to take up too much of your time. You have an interview, so thanks for having a chat.
You got it, man. Very cool to talk to you all the way from Japan. Thanks for listening. Thanks for calling. Enjoy the day.
I'll try to do this again on the same walk sometime. Thanks for having me.
All right, man. Peace.
Bye-bye.
Fun. Right on. Well, we went 90 minutes. I think I am going to call it just because I have maybe another couple hours of reading to do. And I would like to listen to one more of this person's previous interviews before I go into it. That's the thing is to listen to a previous interview is an hour. And sometimes if they don't get into the meat quickly, sometimes I'm sitting there for 30 minutes and I'm like, look, I only got maybe 3 hours left in the night because every time I record a show, I try to do it at 11 a.m. and I wake up at 6 a.m. because I want to make sure by 11 I'm totally awake, have been awake for hours, and I dedicate from 6 to 11 to just the kind of the outline creation, because I've already done the research. I've already got the pages and pages of notes, and now I just need to curate it, line it up, write an intro, and by the time we're going at 11 o'clock, all I've done for the day is have coffee and read this person's work and get into their work. So it just puts me definitely on my A game, because it takes a lot of work. You know, somebody else might be able to do what I do much more effortlessly, but it takes a lot of effort for me to be on that A game. So I'm probably going to call it in. I would have done it on the 25th. That is my birthday this month, old March 25th, Aries. And I have birthday commitments that are just not going to be a joint session. So this was the next best option. I think we all probably want tomorrow's interview to go as good as it can. It is a return guest. I'm going to not say who it is, because I do not like to say things that aren't recorded, but the last 2 episodes of March are definitely recorded. I think they're really, really good. One is a return guest and one is new, both heavily conspiratorial and really good speakers and experts on what they're about. So I think you're going to like them. I really do. It's been a diverse month. I wanted to I was thinking one occult show, and that was KJ Osborne. It wasn't necessarily a cult. And I think when people say they like the magic shows, they like the shows that are about magic from a perspective that isn't, this is the devil's work and we should avoid it. I think they like the Michael Greer's, Gordon. I think they like the perspective that this is just a tool of reality and we can use it. And that's kind of what I want to kind of fold back in. I did a lot of those shows kind of right before the year ended, and some people thought it was magic show overload, but I was trying to keep hitting it until I stopped getting emails about how it's all evil. I was like, well, okay, we're going to go back to school. Not to be arrogant, because, I mean, maybe I am, being led straight down the path to hell. It's possible. I'm hoping to it. But regardless, hoping to get some more occult shows going. I've mentioned Mitch Horowitz's The Miracle Club on the air before. He was on RuneSoup. It was great. He might be the next one in that realm. But we're going to try to have some guests in April that are people we've talked about in previous episodes. And there are times, obviously, when guests are like, oh, well, there's this book, there's that. Well, I tried to follow up on a lot of that stuff. Sometimes it doesn't go so well, but I think we got a couple that are going to be kind of follow-ups to other episodes we've done. It'll be fun. But the last 2 of March, pretty proud of them. So I think you'll like them. And I'm going to get out of here. Thanks, guys. As always, it's free to tune in and join. It's archived for Plus people. And I thank you guys a lot. Couldn't do what I do without you. I have the best life in the world. And so many people have been Plus members for a very long time. I apologize for the issue we had transitioning to the new plugin that I'm using to manage subscriptions. I think all the kinks are pretty much worked out at this point. But going through all these accounts, some people have been members for years, like from the beginning, from the transition to Plus, just signed up, still in the game. That's amazing. I mean, it is kind of like how I have a Netflix subscription. It's just, in my opinion, something I'm always going to just have and pay for. But the fact that anybody has done that for the constant content that I've been putting out for 4 years in some cases, I mean, it does mean a lot. That's the kind of validation I look for, because I just think, would I like this show? Would I like this guest? What about their work do I think is most interesting? That's the barometer. And the fact that there's people who've been listening consistently with the same account undisrupted for 4 years, and not a small amount, that's the validation that, getting really deep into the data this past week, I'm glad I saw that, because it makes me confident that if there's some misses, there's some misses. But overall, the people who were on the ride then are still liking the guest selection and everything we're doing. And I think it has changed a little bit too. So, very awesome. Well, thanks, guys. Take care of yourself. I will see you soon.